Welcome to the Growth Shift. I'm David Zylstra. Here's what I've learned after years in business. Every leader who's built something meaningful has a story about the moment they had to shift, when failure forced innovation, when change became opportunity, when they chose growth over comfort. On this show, we dive into those pivotal moments, the setbacks that became breakthroughs, the strategic shifts that accelerated growth, and the frameworks that turn obstacles into opportunities. Because here's the truth. In a world where change is the only constant, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who've learned to shift strategically through it. So whether you're facing your own pivot point or just want to learn from someone who's been there, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Joining us on the Growth Shift is Rachel Ernst. Rachel brings a fascinating dual perspective to leadership. As both an HR consultant helping companies navigate organizational challenges and a former startup founder who lived through the intense highs and lows of building a company from scratch. What makes her story especially compelling is how she's transformed her hard-won lessons from the startup world into practical frameworks that help other leaders avoid those same pitfalls. Now, based in San Francisco, she's at the forefront of helping companies not just adopt AI, but fundamentally shift their team's thinking to making AI-first approaches second nature. Rachel, welcome to the Growth Shift.
Thanks for having me, David. Good to be here.
Now, take us back to the beginning of your professional journey. What happened to pave the path to where you are today?
Yeah, so a bit about my professional journey. I decided to get an MBA and found myself spending a lot of time in student activities and connecting with people and essentially giving them a voice to share things with administration that didn't make them happy. I was in leadership in a women's group, and so the combination of my business background along with this tendency to want to connect with people ended up leading me towards a career in HR. And I've been in HR in a number of different industries, very regulated financial services and consulting, and then in the tech scene in San Francisco. And I've been through a number of different HR positions. And then a few years ago, I went out on my own to start my own company that's called AccelHERate.
AccelHERate with an HER at the end,
That's
of
right.
course. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing at AccelHERate.
Yeah, so AccelHERate is primarily, I founded it specifically because I want to help women to progress their careers, women leaders to progress their careers, but in an authentic way. So not in a way that a company defines that, like, in order to be a leader, you must do these things. I help them find their authentic strengths and name their authentic skills and kind of like truly lean into who they are at their core and use that as their source of power to progress their careers. And since this is about pivotal moments, that I could share what inspired me initially to focus on women. And it's actually started with my mom. So I lost my mom when she was 52. She died of a brain tumor. And obviously that's a life-changing event. I was 25 when that happened. But the reason it had such an impact on me and inspired me to start this company starts back from when she met my dad. So she met my dad at a very strong music school. So they were both in music. She met him and ended up leaving school to follow him to Germany. He was escaping the draft. So she gave up her education early on and ended up becoming a mom and had the three of us. I have two brothers. And really never had an established career. Granted, not to downplay at all being a mother, but I also know that she was hoping to do other things. She got her degree later in life. And then finally, once my brothers and I had left the house, she was really focused on herself and wanting to develop herself and find that career and do all the things she loved. And unfortunately, she got a brain tumor and passed away. So, for me, seeing that happen, like, she never really got to dive deep into her true self and really spend that time to find what she truly loved outside of us, obviously, her children. And I saw a lot of things that she chose to sacrifice in order to do that. And I want to make sure that I help women really focus on themselves and progress in the way that they choose to.
Wow, that's an incredible story, Rachel. Thank you for sharing that. I mean,
Yeah.
so you got your MBA initially, right? You
Yeah.
landed in HR for obvious reasons, for what you enjoy and what you wanted to pursue. That's not a natural progression for many people who have an MBA. But
No.
it sounds like there was always something sort of, in your mind or in your heart as well, probably both, about, this experience of, seeing what your mother went through on her own journey. Is that really one of the reasons that inspired you to leave your HR role and start something for yourself? Or when did you start really connecting those dots of, how you felt or how you experienced with your mother's journey to then paving the way forwards for what you're doing now with AccelHERate?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. My mom had passed away right before I was starting my career, so I found myself that inspiration. I found myself doing a lot of women's groups and starting women's groups or being a part of women's groups in organizations. So I'm going to name one other pivotal moment, kind of like tying my mom's passing into that inspiration in my career and ultimately leaving to start this coaching company. So like I mentioned, I like to be involved in women's affinity groups. And in one of the companies that I worked at, we didn't have something to develop our women. And we had a lot of very strong mid-level leaders. And one of the executives came to me and said, "Hey, Rachel, I really want to start a women's affinity, women's growth group here. But since it's kind of in your purview to design this program, will you please partner with me?" So I did, and I worked with that executive to do that. And then we said, okay, we need budget to do this. And we went to the CFO and said, hey, we would like some money to develop. We have a significant amount of women here. It's really important. And I think this is the pivotal juncture here when the response from the CFO was, I want you to show me that there's a need for this in order to give you, I think we were asking for like $55,000, which I understand is a fair amount of money, but the fact that we had to prove that there is a need to develop women when there was very minimal women executives, it just really sat with me. And I still remember this. So when someone says that to me, it's almost a challenge, like, oh, I will prove that to you, and I will design a program and I will prove it to you, and we're going to get this money. Like, you're challenging me, I'm going to do it. But I was also frustrated. So we did show the need for it by designing a women's mentorship program. We had a lot of people participate and ended up getting the money, and created a lot of women's affinity groups. But this lack of realization of how deep the need is for developing women, this person's response to us is representative of a lot of what I see, perhaps seen as an HR professional, is not fully grasping the challenge that women have. And it's not like they need the support necessarily. It's that there isn't enough understanding of the unique things that women require in order to progress themselves.
So if we look at that, I'm curious to learn a little bit more of that divide between, women development in companies and just general development, because some people might just bundle it together, like the CFO you're mentioning, and saying, hey, like, why specialize just for women? Why can't everybody just go through the same development? What's the most fundamental difference or need for specialized development for women versus men in whatever situation?
Well, this is what I've observed, that the frameworks that are designed, because most companies have some kind of like, here's our leadership framework and this is what's needed in order to be a leader. So that's one aspect. And most of those frameworks are designed by existing leaders, because typically when you write that, it's who are some great leaders and describe what it is that makes them great. Now, when you look at the highest level of leaders, it's primarily men. So most of those qualities tend to be things that men do more naturally, which is great. It's just that isn't always a natural thing for women. And so what ends up happening is these leadership programs, even that are designed for women, a lot of times I don't agree with them. It's like this assumption, like, communication and executive presence and dressing for success. There are all these things that are like, we don't perceive that you're doing this as well as our model, which is kind of built more on men. Not that I'm saying men aren't great leaders, it's just more natural for them. You must change yourself in order to shift to this model. And in my perspective, it's more when I coach women, and again, the inspiration behind this is, let's look at your unique strengths, the things that really are innate to you. And when you take that deep dive to understand yourself, that's where your power is going to come from, and help you really focus on, like your leadership strengths and get yourself into the right leadership position. I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of went off on my tangent there.
No, that's all right. I think, I mean, if I could interpret a little bit of what you're saying, it sounds like there's just some really basic fundamental differences between how men and women operate, how
Yes.
we think, and the need for being able to lean into those natural abilities or instincts or tendencies to be able to bring those to the surface because a strong leader has strong traits not all across the board, but in very specific areas, which makes them a very good leader for very specific reasons. But good
Yes.
leaders are good because they also have a good team around them. So being able to take your strengths to the surface, lead with
Yes.
those, and then perhaps build a team around you for the areas that maybe you don't want to focus on, shouldn't focus on, whatever the reason be, right?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to share one other thing that inspired me to have this focus is that when you look at the experience of women leaders at companies and male leaders at companies, their sentiment and their engagement and happiness in an organization tends to be lower on average across most of the typical engagement categories like learning and development and I don't know, compensation and flexible work policies, things like that. Their perception of their experience in their organization tends to be a lower engagement level than men. So it just kind of goes to show that the environment that built for organizations is not considering, I guess, enough of what is great for all parties involved. I'll just say, because obviously it's not just about men and women. There are a lot of different demographics that the companies need to be thinking about. But I do see that big difference. So I know consistently that the experience of women leaders tends to get harder and harder as they progress in organizations.
So Rachel, going back again, MBA, HR, living through an experience where you witnessed your mother up against certain challenges that perhaps set her back in some ways professionally, and then she was able to then push forwards, and ultimately, she died quite young. And then from there, you had another experience in an organization where, you had to prove the need for women development. You proved that need, you built the program around it. So there were some very clear pivotal moments that shaped the direction you're going, but what ultimately led you to leaving the corporate job world yourself and setting out on your own?
It's a good question, and it's not something I took lightly, and I considered it for about 8 years through the course of a few different companies. So we'll say that it's something that had been building. What I realized in observing the way organizations work is that the environment is not set up to really enable women to progress in the natural, authentic way. And I realized that if, remaining within, let's just say, the construct of corporate doesn't allow me to do the kind of work and really make the kind of impact that I want to make, because I always need to align with the company's philosophy and their values and what they expect of leaders, which I will always do as an HR professional. But I can't break out of that if I'm in the corporate environment. So I wanted to get out of the typical construct of corporate and try to make an impact in the way that I feel will really move the dial in progressing women and seeing more of a balance of gender at the top. I just basically didn't want the corporate constraints that happen in a corporate environment, and have the freedom to pursue what in the way that I wanted to progress women.
So like a true entrepreneur, right? You had a passion, you saw a problem, and now you're working to
That's
fix it
right.
without constraints, only the ones that you
That's
might
right.
fall
I
into
don't want
yourself.
anyone telling me what to do.
Yeah. So Rachel, you work with companies on HR consulting and coaching, right? But there's a clear problem that you're solving, right? Not enough women, or not enough focus on the development of women within organizations. So if there's,
Yeah.
with such a prominent problem, right, and with such little development for women happening within companies, how do you actually go about finding who's ready for your help, and who would actually value what it is that you do?
Well, there are a number of different things that I've done so far. I think it's interesting when you're an entrepreneur, you try a lot of different things and you can never actually measure the return on investment in marketing. But the various things that I've done so far is like, and this is where AI comes into some of the work I do, is to really think about what's the problem that I'm trying to solve, and what is the profile of the kind of person that would be right for me to coach, like women who want to progress, have that fire to do that, recognize this challenge, don't feel like they can be themselves. They have to change themselves in order to be great leaders. So I've really thought through how to articulate that, things that I do. I've gone to a conference, and all of my marketing materials really tries to articulate what I do. And I think, that kind of filters out the right women. Some women may not feel that, and they do want to conform to the structure. Or a lot of women also just choose not to progress in their careers, which is their choice. So it's almost like the way that I design it, women can decide whether or not they fit into what I'm offering. I've also held a number of focus groups to understand what's going to help women. I've worked with a lot of women leaders across time, so I've spent a lot of time listening and talking to them and running groups as well.
All right, so it sounds like you're really just putting yourself out there. You're speaking from the heart, you're
Yeah.
marketing with your values, and you're just trying to
Yeah.
attract people, as anyone does, trying to attract the people who would be a right fit, right? People who you can actually help. I'd love to learn
Yeah.
more, Rachel, about, what's your vision? What's your goal for AccelHERate? That
Yeah.
dual question will say, what's your goal right now? What's your focus? And what do you think are the biggest challenges you're up against to make that happen?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a vision, like if AccelHERate were all that my heart desired. I think two things would be happening of what I would be doing, and then I have the impact of that. So the two things that I would be doing are I would be running cohorts of women leaders that self-select into the program. And they're women from all different backgrounds, all different companies that are coming to be coached together in a group environment. I almost want to lead them collectively on their journey. I strongly believe in, women, when women come together to help one another, that has a multiplier effect on their ability to progress. And them coming from a number of different companies, they're going to learn from one another. So I want to facilitate that learning, but also give them this guidance to really look deep within themselves, reflect with one another, and progress in their career. So I would be running these ongoing cohorts of probably 12 women, but multiple cohorts of 12 women, probably for 6 months at a time. It's important to me that they're self-selecting in, and it's not something that I go into a company, the company sponsors, because I want the women to choose to want to do it versus a company saying, hey, you're great, we're going to put you in this. I want them to really be driven to want to make the change, because that's when you have the most impact coming out of a program like this. The other thing that I would be doing is running a very large women's retreat. I actually went to a retreat at this place called 1440 Multi-University. It's in Santa Cruz. I live in California. It's a pretty famous place. And I went to a development with Liz Gilbert and Cheryl Strayed. Liz Gilbert wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and Cheryl Strayed wrote Wild, if you've heard of these. But these are very prominent women. And it was just so powerful to have 500 women in a room. So I'm like, I want to do that too. But I'm going to do this and help women on their, find their power and their leadership path, and give them different ways that they can take care of themselves, mental health, physical health, emotional health, and really give them a deep dive for 4 days. And I will be doing that. I like to just say I will be doing it, not even I aspire. I will be doing that once a year.
Yeah.
And then, look, the impact is that we will see a balance of genders at executive levels. They're the things that I want to do and I love to do. But ultimately, what I continue to monitor is a balance of gender at leadership levels. And I'd like to see that shift more than is expected within my lifetime.
Oh, it sounds like, well, of course, not just sounds like, but there is a big shift that needs to happen if we look at this, right? And it sounds like for you to be able to do that, right, you want to attract people in who are coming to you looking for solutions. I mean, with the approach that you're taking right now of marketing and putting out your message and your voice, what sort of challenges do you feel that you're up against when it comes to that in today's world, 2025, 2026? Everyone's using social media.
Yes.
Everyone's putting their message out there. Most people are leading with value. Right, so
Yes.
how do you fit in with that? How are you really going to make this happen for yourself?
Yes. And if people could see my body language, I'm shaking my head, yes, it's extremely hard. The challenge is a number of them, which I imagine resonate with other entrepreneurs and people trying to build their profiles. You're on LinkedIn for probably 30 seconds and the feed will refresh and something new pops up. So I have done a lot of LinkedIn marketing, a lot in my perspective, but people will post several times a day, and to be, even just to have my post seen is difficult because so many people are out there putting things on LinkedIn. at any given time. Even if you use the different strategies that LinkedIn recommends and you have different keywords and hashtags and you tag people and all these things, it's still very difficult to do unless you're an Adam Grant or someone who has built themselves up significantly. So that's one. Just, having a post being seen is challenging. I have also tried a YouTube podcast. I called it AccelHERate Coffee Break. And I just did like very quick things that women could use to progress their careers. Now that means that someone has to go onto YouTube and they have to find my channel and then listen to the whole thing. Trying to get someone's attention these days for more than 15 seconds, right? Even that can feel like a lot, is very challenging. So just trying to get someone to actually find my podcast on YouTube and listen to it even for the first minute. Like, we're all fighting for folks' time from people. So that's extremely challenging. And then sending out notes to people, even that I know, asking for response rates, and tracking that. And then having that due diligence. I wrote one note, now I need to follow up again and then follow up again and track how I'm doing. All of that is challenging. And let's face it, most people who decide to be an entrepreneur have a really interesting idea, whether it's a product or a service. They don't love sitting and writing business development content and tracking. I could probably learn how to use AI even better, but I'm, still more in the beginning stages of my journey. And that's not really where I want to be spending my time, to be honest. I'd rather be coaching.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And this is the biggest thing I think for coaches as well, is you get in the business to help people, you get in the business to coach. But unfortunately, you don't realize how much marketing is going to go into it at the same time, right? I think it's pretty synonymous with all businesses these days.
Yes.
It's a real challenge that we're up against with that. So you mentioned AI there, Rachel. I mean, there's a lot that you're up against. There's a lot you have to do with marketing, with coaching, with delivery. Where does AI come to start to fit into the mix with you?
Well, a few different things. I mentioned that I have done focus groups to understand challenges that women face. I also recognize that I live in California and there's probably certain demographics that are here. So by talking to certain groups of women, I'm really not getting a full comprehensive perspective of what women leaders are facing in terms of challenges in the corporate environment. So as I have designed my marketing materials, I've used ChatGPT or Claude to say, like, I want to make sure that you research in these areas, take a look at these sources, challenges that women have, looking at the Lean and McKinsey study, various well-known sources that have spent a lot of time looking at the challenges that women have and doing surveys to help design both like the offering as well as how I'm going to articulate what the offering is so that people say, wow, that's me and I want to take advantage of this and I want to reach out to this person. So it's using AI to do deep research, essentially, that would take a very, very long time if I were to take that up on my own. And design my marketing materials. And yeah, marketing communication, I'd say that's the main thing that I use AI for right now.
So marketing communication sounds like a little bit of a thought partner there with you as well, to dive deeper, to validate your thoughts and help you articulate things better. One of the areas I'd love to chat about a little bit here as well, Rachel, is how does you help clients think about change, especially change around like new technology and AI and such, right? Because you're working with women in leadership positions, right?
Yeah.
Women who need to be a leader and have people follow, right? One of the biggest challenges for any leader, regardless of gender, is making a decision, especially a strategic one or a big one that's going to push a company forwards or a division, and having the proper uptake within their team, right?
Yeah.
Change is uncomfortable, right?
Yes.
And most people are resistant to that. So when you're helping your clients and when you're consulting, helping people make decisions around change,
yeah,
how do you do that with AI?
It's a very big and deep question. So I'm going to think about it in a few different ways. Some of it would be with AI and some of it not necessarily. And maybe it's because I'm in the early days of using it. The first thing I typically do is talk to the leaders about what is the outcome that will be different from what's happening now as a result of this change. Like, essentially, what are you trying to get to? How will things look different in the future if this change happens? And then I think through with them, what is it that people on your team are motivated by? Because there's, in terms of influencing people to act in a certain way, there's a push and a pull. And the push is a tell, like this is what's going to happen and I want you to follow it. Now, let's be honest, human behavior doesn't necessarily react well to something like that versus a pull, which is I want to understand from you, David, like what is it if you talk to me about the most motivating experience you've had in your life. Tell me about what that was, what exactly was motivating for you. And then I listen and I take those aspects and think about how I can link that to the change and the outcome that I want to see. So I can think about what is it that's going to drive you to move in this direction that I hope for you to do. So there's the conversation that I like to have with the executives. Now, in terms of using AI, what I do is learn about, ask AI to look at a lot of different research around human behavior. And when you think about humans at work, what is it that motivates them to act in a particular way? And when change happens, what is the typical, there's a typical change curve that happens for people. So learning more about that and how to help people. I wouldn't say you can counter that change curve because it's just the way humans work, but what can you do to help people through that change? So essentially to me, AI is a very quick way of doing very broad and deep research on human behavior and change plans to ensure that when we put together the way that we want to move change in the organization, it's a very thoughtful, well-researched plan centered in human behavior at work.
So if I could take everything you said there and kind of just distill it, it sounds like you're really just you are, and you're also showing people how to meet people where they're at,
Yes.
right? Especially when
Yes.
it comes to change, understand where they are, what needs to happen, and using AI to help you get that deeper insight. Like broad research, sure, you can do questionnaires and employee satisfaction,
Sure.
reviews and all this stuff, but they're never that accurate, right? If you
No.
can actually get a broader perspective and a deeper perspective as well, then you
Yes.
can truly meet people where they're at and help them forward instead of maybe push them forwards.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Motivate or inspire them forward. Maybe is
Yeah.
the words that I would use with a leader. And I love your phrasing of meet them where they are. It's what one of my favorite managers would say. I'd be like, I want in my earlier days of an HR business partner, I'm going to tell this person X, Y, and Z. And he'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, slow down, tiger. Like, you got to think about where this person is now. Maybe you want them to be in a certain place to lead their team, but they're not there right now. And you have to recognize and really observe where they are now and meet them there. And then really learn about what drives them to help them progress. So I love that. Meet them where they are.
So looking back, Rachel, at your own pivot experiences, right, that really shaped the direction that you chose in life and with your career, of course, and applying that to AI, what sort of parallels do you see between just general strategic pivots and the adoption of new tech such as AI?
I think about, when these pivotal changes tend to be, at least for me, significant life experiences. And initially, when something happens, like my mom being diagnosed with a brain tumor or the CFO being like, prove to me this thing, you're like, I don't want to even believe this. Like, it's so bizarre. And it really hits me that there's a sense of like, I don't really want to recognize that this is coming because it's so different. So I could see like when this AI comes up, there's distrust. Maybe this thing will just go away. I'm going to maybe like stay on the sidelines and observe a bit because maybe it's going to do something negative to me. Then there's okay, I'm going to start to slowly creep towards it, maybe learn a little bit and kind of go through again. I mentioned the change curve. Of course, right now I'm not going to be articulate about like all the different phases of it, but you don't want to recognize it, you deny it, then you start to go through it, you're angry, then there's sadness, and then there's acceptance. And I almost feel like those pivotal times you go through that phase, and with AI it's the same thing. Like there's frustration, there's a lot of distrust of it, and sometimes perhaps for good reason. But I think those who have gone through, let's call them pivotal moments, significant life experiences a number of times and have that resilience, they will likely move through the adoption of AI more quickly because of that resilience, let's say, that they've built over time to be open to something like that. I don't know. I just you made me really think through that. So I pulled that out. That's a good answer.
I think that's great. Rachel, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the Growth Shift today and for sharing your journey, your experiences. your thoughts and your perspectives. Now, one final question for you.
Sure.
Other leaders who are facing their own potential pivot moment right now, whether it's AI adoption, market changes, operational challenges, whatever it is, what's the one mindset shift you wish every leader understood before they hit that wall?
Yeah, the very first thing that jumped into my mind when you asked that is not to assume that the way I am impacted by this change is the way that everyone's going to be impacted by this change. And what's going to help me move through this change is the answer that I should use to move the rest of my team through this change. I think there's this tendency to not observe the fact that you're just personalizing it and assuming that your experience is what others' experiences will be. Therefore, typically my recommendation is to pause and observe your own reaction to it and really spend some time thinking about how might my team react and would it be different or the same as me, and spend some time learning about it before you jump into typically what I see as a push, like I want X adoption of this by this time and everyone needs to learn and we're going to measure it this way. There is a need for that in some ways, but I think there isn't enough attention spent on what truly is going to inspire people to adopt this change and how is it going to benefit each of them and how can we take them on that journey.
For any of our listeners who might like to connect with you to continue the conversation or to learn any more, what would be the best way to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I am on LinkedIn. So if you go to linkedin.com/Rachel Elise Ernst, I think it's Rachel Elise Ernst or Rachel Elise. Try both of those. One of them will work. I'm also www.AccelHERate with an HER in the middle.org. You could find me there, and through there you could fill out a contact sheet to be able to connect with me. So hopefully this has been an inspiration or maybe at least given you some food for thought, and would love to connect to people.
And that's a wrap on another episode of The Growth Shift. If this conversation sparked something for you, whether it's a new perspective on failure, a strategy you want to try, or just the reminder that every setback can become a setup for something bigger, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid change. They're the ones who shift strategically through it. If you're ready to build the systems that help you grow without the chaos, head over to valentix.io. We help businesses like yours scale smarter, not harder. I'm David Zylstra, and I'll see you in the next shift.